Welcome to the SportsPro Podcast.
Hi everyone, and welcome once again to the SportsPro Podcast. My name is Eoin Connolly. I am the editor-at-large at SportsPro. Hope you're well. Very happy to be back. Very happy to be back in the company of SportsPro Deputy Editor Sam Carp. Hello, Sam.
Hi, Eoin. Thanks for having me on. How are you doing?
Not too bad, Sam. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Very well.
Glad to hear it. And joining us from behind the decks, SportsPro Podcast producer and SportsPro staff writer Ed Dixon. Hi, Ed.
Hi, Owen. How are you?
Very well, thanks, Ed. How are you?
Good. Oh, well, thanks. Yeah, stepping up. Here we go.
Look forward to it. We are going to be talking about SportsPro's 2021 Destinations Report in the first part of the podcast. In part two, we're going to hear about what goes on inside sports venues, or what to expect inside sports venues over the next decade, evangelizing the future of sports venues, with a session from SportsPro Live, Henk van Raan, the Chief Innovation Officer at the Johan Cruijff Arena in Amsterdam, home of Ajax, and our own Chris Stone, the SportsPro event content manager. They spoke last week about how the stadium experience is going to evolve in the next few years. But guys, we actually, in some parts of the world, have a stadium experience at the moment for the first time in quite a while, or certainly increasingly seeing events taking place at a bigger and bigger scale. We had an indoor pandemic record in Texas at the weekend. Canelo Alvarez beating Billy Joe Saunders in a super middleweight boxing match in front of, what was the number, guys? I know one of you will have this at your fingertips, but it was somewhere north of 70,000 spectators in the AT&T Stadium in Arlington.
73,126, to be exact.
There you go.
And we've seen a lot of conversation about the destination of the UEFA Champions League final, Sam. Istanbul, Turkey moving back into lockdown, London potentially a venue, although it now looks likely once again to be Portugal, where Chelsea and Manchester City will play. But I think fair to say, the course of the pandemic, public health conditions being what they are, 2021 is it's a very different conversation. I mean, we daily are getting different updates on what kind of Olympics we're going to expect in Tokyo. Obviously, we have the tragedy unfolding in India right now, which means that the IPL, which was already behind closed doors, has been cancelled. We kind of have to put 2021 in a box when it comes to destinations, even though we are having these conversations about where certain events are going to take place.
Yeah, it's interesting to watch unfold at the moment, especially Saturday. Well, I suppose early hours of Sunday morning here in the UK with Canelo Saunders. It almost looked otherworldly seeing that many fans inside an indoor venue after what we've seen over the past sort of 12, 13 months. Some would say it's quite an interesting time to try and break the record for a crowd for an indoor boxing event. But at the same time, Texas kind of has a bit of a record of doing this in recent times. I think it was the Dallas Cowboys during the NFL season last year had by far the highest average attendance. I think something close to 30,000 was the official figure, which was more than double of the second nearest team. And also the Texas Rangers, they played their first game of the MLB season in front of a sold out crowd, I believe, at their ground. So it's kind of, as you're looking at this, you're sort of seeing, I think what you're seeing is certain destinations emerging as options in a way, as kind of coming out of this pandemic, they're putting themselves forward as viable options for event organisers that maybe can't stage their events where they want to. So obviously Texas is kind of throwing its hat into the ring for that. You're seeing the UK do the same in some instances, dating back even to when UEFA was kind of considering what to do with the Euros. I know the British government was quite keen to say that they were ready to host events if needed, and kind of have done the same with the Champions League final, as you alluded to before. So yeah, as you say, I think as we move forward into this year, I think what we're going to see is almost kind of similar to what we saw last year in a way, in the sense that there are going to be certain parts of the world where the cases aren't quite as high. In the only, I suppose, the main difference this year is that there's going to be certain countries where the vaccine rollout is further along, so places are going to be in a better position to put themselves forward to not only host these events, but host these events with some spectators in attendance as well. So I think that's kind of the main thing that we're going to see this year, is that while things aren't necessarily going to be held in the shape that they were kind of originally intended, we are going to see more places opening up and kind of able to step in and put themselves forward to do so.
And we're going to see seasonal factors as well, I suppose, come into effect here with the course of the virus alongside that vaccine rollout, as you mentioned. And I think probably much less travel. I mean, we already know that Tokyo 2020 is happening without any international fans, at least. And I suspect that will not be the only major event that goes ahead with that stipulation or something like it. It's going to be very complex for fans to make international trips in great numbers. Although I know that is expected to happen for the Champions League final when certain changes are made within the EU and Europe, of which the UK is now kind of excellent part. But the typical conversation we would have about a destination and what being a sporting destination means and what it means to host a major event in this way, it's on hold for now.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what's also going to be interesting is that you might see certain destinations being perhaps opportunistic in this situation. I know that, for example, last year there were quite a few that kind of came to the fore. So, for example, you had the UAE, which staged the IPL and the UFC's Fight Island. Budapest became the host of the International Swimming League second season, also stepped in to stage a number of European football games. Portugal did the same last year with the Champions League final 8 and could even get the final this year. And it's also, I suppose, destinations are going to be thinking about the reasons that they host major events. So it might not make a lot of sense for some destinations to stage them this year, given that the objectives that they have for staging an event won't really necessarily align. So I think that one of the events that's already been moved to 2022 is the 2021 Women's Rugby World Cup, which was, I believe I'm right in saying, was going to be in New Zealand. And kind of one of the main reasons for them staging that event was to drive international tourism. So obviously that's kind of not something that they're going to be able to do this year. Whereas you look at a destination like Saudi Arabia, for example, their objectives for hosting a major event, while eventually maybe to drive more tourism, is first of all to sort of change the perception around it as a nation. So you're already seeing, even today, I think Eddie Hearn has come out and said that Saudi Arabia is likely to host the Anthony Joshua Tyson Fury fight in August. And for me, it wouldn't necessarily be a surprise if we saw Saudi Arabia kind of offering itself forward to host more events before the year's over, while they can't be staged in their kind of the first choice, so to speak. So, and I think it would be kind of, that might even pose a bit of a challenge for some sports, given that, in the past they may well have been able to turn down Saudi Arabia on kind of moral grounds. What a lot of people know is that, a country like Saudi Arabia is going to offer quite a significant hosting fee as well. So I think there'll be a challenge for sports in that sense as well. And so, yeah, I think there's a few sides to it. There's the kind of objectives that these destinations have in terms of why they host major events, and also on the other side of that, you'll have sports kind of trying to weigh up and decide what makes most sense in terms of where they take their events.
Yeah, and I suppose that will particularly come to a head as we face up to a kind of calendar crunch that has been looming over the last 18 months, and the opportunity, or the option rather, to just turf something into the following year is receding in some cases. Right, let's talk about the destinations report. What were some of the conversations you were having, guys? Ed, I'm going to bring you in. I know you were talking to Copenhagen about their strategy, but Sam, what was the broader remit for the piece?
Yeah, so I suppose in previous years, the destinations report probably would have been a lot more straightforward in terms of you primarily be asking these stakeholders kind of about, what their cities have to offer, what events they're going after. Whereas this year, I suppose it was almost a little bit more interesting in a way. There was kind of different angles to it in the sense that you could talk a lot more about what event hosting is actually going to look like in the wake of the pandemic, how destinations are kind of going to approach bidding for these events and the various different things that they're going to take into account. So I think we were, in putting together the report, we kind of wanted to give a bit of a broad overview of how the pandemic has impacted those conversations and how it will continue to do so. So I suppose some of the things to take into consideration will be sort of in the immediate aftermath of this is what destinations are going to be focusing on. So whether they're going to perhaps be focusing on more domestic events rather than international events, whether they're going to be thinking about protecting existing events that they're sort of already contracted to host. And then I suppose budget allocation as well, as those are going to have been quite significantly impacted by what's happened in the past 13, 14 months. And then looking further ahead, I think some of the more interesting conversations were kind of around what the events are actually going to look like, whether they do return to what they were before the pandemic, or whether we're going to see some sort of hybrids adopted where you sort of have people competing in person, some people competing remotely, all of those sorts of things. And yeah, in putting that together, we've done kind of a broad overview piece which has some insight from Ian Edmondson, who was formerly of London and Partners. He played quite an important role in bringing the Olympics to London in 2012. We've also got some destination profiles in there, one of which you alluded to already, which Ed wrote about Copenhagen. There's a piece on Ottawa, which our editorial director Michael Long has written, a city perhaps not quite as well known for sport as other urban centres like Toronto and Montreal in Canada, but which has ambitions of hosting events of all types and sizes in the future. Yeah, and then there's a piece that I wrote about Queensland, which, as I'm sure our listeners will know, was recently named as the preferred bidder for the 2032 Olympic Games. And yeah, and then we've also got a bit on emerging destinations. So basically, we've tried to pinpoint a few countries, some cities whose hosting ambitions have kind of marked themselves out as ones to watch in the years ahead, both in terms of kind of the big major international events, but also kind of some of the more niche events as well. So yeah, there's plenty in there, plenty of sort of different size ambitions, but yeah, lots of interesting stuff to chew over for sure.
Yeah, and Ed, Copenhagen is an interesting place to start because I feel like it was the scale of city that was having long-term thoughts about what its host strategy would look like, probably in the 2010s, when you were starting to see this separation of cities like London, for example, or you could just write down a list of the Olympic hosts, to be honest: London, Los Angeles, Paris, places like that, major centres that could host mega events, World Cups and Olympics, from other places where perhaps those events had grown to too great a scale, and so they are then thinking, okay, well, maybe a regional Olympics is on the horizon for us at some point, but what do we do? What's the end point? What kind of ambition do we have, and what are the right kind of events for us to host? And of course, that is now meeting broader questions about what sports events are going to look like, festivalization, digitization, all those type of things through the 2020s. So what were some of the things that you gleaned from your conversations with Copenhagen?
Yeah, well, I build the piece as sort of Copenhagen being sort of an eco epicenter, and it largely covers their commitment to sustainability, and that's not a recent thing for Copenhagen. So it's kind of been just embedded in the DNA of the city. It's always been there. It's cycling is just sort of part of the culture there, for example. And that's sort of in stark contrast to a lot of other sort of major hosting cities that are having to pivot their strategy to sort of meet these sort of climate targets and pressures, indeed. So it was sort of exploring that, and the impression I've got with speaking to Copenhagen is they're very comfortable with what their offer is, their proposition is. They're not overly interested in trying to put a square peg in a round hole. I mean, speaking to them, there was a a fleeting proposal a couple of years ago, maybe exploring the idea of a Grand Prix in Denmark, and that never got off the ground just because it just would not fit the approach of the city. It would just be one massive contradiction. But also, they also make a very big thing about it's not just about sort of attractions and sort of maybe gimmicky kind of events, if you like. It's very much more about people and sharing those experiences, and they want to host the kind of events that they feel will sort of celebrate those. So, I mean, the biggest thing they've gone on this year is the Euros. They've been permitted to host up to 11,000 fans in Copenhagen at the stadium there. And then beyond that, they've got a number of UCI events, the Tour de France, Grand Depart in 2022. So for them, it's got to be a case of finding the right fit for them, if you like, and they're also looking to position themselves as a leading. Well, they already are a leading, sort of eco city, if you like. But they've got a number of carbon neutral targets in the next couple of years, and they want to create an opportunity for sport events to be part of that journey with them when they come to Copenhagen, sort of be seen as responsible in that regard when it comes to the environment.
Yeah, that's an interesting point to explore, that connection between identity and sustainability and the ways in which events can spring from local culture and spring from what's important to a destination and what kind of what a destination can bring of itself to an event. What were some of the other approaches that they took to make that connection?
I think they're very big into mass participation, that it could be whether you're looking to take part in an event, even something like the Copenhagen Marathon, which can attract, I think, up to about over 100,000 people that come and watch. So whether you're participating or attending just to watch an event, they're looking to bring to sort of make it part of the culture. It's not a case of just dropping an event into a space that they've designated in the city for it. They try and sort of let it sort of seep into every kind of corner in Copenhagen, and actually it's kind of an example of the size of the city, that it's in comparison to other, as you say, reel off any major hosting city, using Tokyo as an example, for this year's Olympics. But Copenhagen, they can use their sort of comparatively modest size to their advantage, where they can make sure that the event is sort of prevalent throughout, which means that it's more people are going to be aware of it, and therefore it's going to prompt more and more engagement as well. So that was kind of one of the main things I've noticed, that they really try and make it, very much a sort of a milestone in the sort of city's calendar, because they know as a city that for the population they need to keep attracting more events to the city to make it to increase its appeal for the people living there. That's a key part of their objective, really, and they are looking to diversify their sort of the events they're hosting, but it won't be at the cost of their values.
Yeah, and you mentioned Euro 2020. It's not quite going to be the spectacle that we all hoped for at the start of last year, but it's going to happen, and it's going to happen in cities including Copenhagen. What was the value that they saw themselves getting out of that event?
Well, it goes back to the point I made earlier, that it's arguably going to be the biggest event of the year. Well, certainly it's going to be football. Obviously, it's got the Olympics and hopefully Fury Joshua to compete with, for example. But it is going to be one of those milestone events of the year. Obviously, when they applied to host, they weren't expecting a global pandemic, but they knew it for them. It's one of those real kind of milestone events that they want to bring more of to the city, that they feel matches their value. Matches their values, I should say. I think as well, it ultimately it will put them on the map, because when you think Copenhagen, you don't ultimately necessarily think those major events. So for them, it blends that global appeal with sort of the local values that I've mentioned.
Yeah, something that I'm thinking, ways in which something can be distinctive, and I wonder as well whether a trend that we'll see is along the mass participation lines, but events that spring from a destination a little bit more, rather than the kind of traveling circus model. which has been very successful for a lot of events. But the evolution of that relationship will be very much worth following, I think. But Sam, you were looking at the other end of the world. You were talking to hosting authorities down in Queensland, where, as you say, they are preparing for a likely, by no means definite, we are contractually stipulated to note, but a likely Olympic Games in 2032. What's the picture there in Queensland?
Well, yeah, you say not contractually yet, but I think John Coates said this week that Brisbane's on the final lap, so I don't think it's too far away. But yeah, obviously, I think Queensland, their hosting ambition has been known for quite some time now, dating back to Gold Coast 2018, I suppose, which laid a lot of the groundwork for this 2032 bid in terms of the facilities and the infrastructure, a lot of which kind of is being used as part of their proposal to the IOC. And then Sports Accord obviously was hosted a year later, which exposed a lot of the key decision makers in the federation world to the region. But I think kind of the focus of this piece more, what was kind of interesting about it is that, while the world was sort of brought to a standstill last year, it felt like almost no one was kind of able to make any progress. Everyone was talking about how they sort of stopped and sort of took a step back approach and looked at what they could do in the future. Queensland kind of kept trucking along and almost reinforced its credentials as a major event host. So it became the site for a number of Australian sports in the wake of the pandemic. So the AFL, the NRL, the Women's National Basketball League, Super Netball as well. So yeah, I think even what was interesting with that is that, even in a year when so much came to a standstill, Queensland was kind of still able to keep plodding along, keep hosting events, keep sort of highlighting the infrastructure that it has and the capabilities that it has to host these major events. And I'm sure that's probably something that resonated with the IOC and that they took notice of. And, as an onlooker, there's probably something to be said for being able to guarantee certainty in a year when there was so much uncertainty. So I suppose that's probably something that was quite attractive to the International Olympic Committee.
Yeah, and the relationship between Queensland and the IOC is interesting, or the conversation that's been going on between Queensland and the IOC, because you do have, this is very much a regional Olympics, and Queensland is presenting itself as a region, as a sports region. I know that Brisbane is kind of the one of the centres of that, but how does that change the way that they think about their event strategy?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I think, I suppose what it does is it doesn't limit them. Yeah, it basically means that they're able to maximise everything that the region has to offer, rather than kind of, as you say, Brisbane's kind of front and centre. But I think throughout they've been quite clear that that the 2032 Olympics, should it be awarded there, is something that's going to benefit the entire region. I think a press conference immediately after the preferred candidacy was announced, the question was asked whether it's going to be referred to as Brisbane 2032 or Queensland 2032, and they said they hadn't decided yet, which I just think kind of speaks to the fact that, they're not limiting this. They are positioning this as something for the entire region, and as it is a bid that basically they are able to maximise a lot of everything that the region has to offer.
Yeah, on that point, Sam, about regional bids, I know that's a specific region of Australia, but I think it's not unexpected to think that we're going to see more regional bids that maybe involve multiple countries within a certain area. I mean, just going back to Denmark and Copenhagen, they put themselves forward as a host of the Women's European Championships in 2025. But in 2027, they're going to bid for it looks like they're going to bid for the Women's World Cup, and that'll be part of a bid alongside the other Nordic countries. So, and I think that ties into your point about, not just benefiting, a particular city, but the wider region, and sort of tapping into that.
Yeah, and I think it's a trend that we could see popping up in lots of different contexts. And I mean, going back to Euro 2020, it's a bit of a shame we haven't seen that in its fullest incarnation, just because of some of the other second tier event cities that we might have seen involved with it. Budapest has already been mentioned, and they might smart a bit at the perception of them as a second-tier event city, given the number of World Championships they've hosted in recent years. But places that haven't always had that major event outing, Dublin, which has had to drop off the Euro 2020 list, and there are other cities of that size where you could see some kind of collegiate approach towards staging the very biggest events in the future. And the irony is that World Cups and Olympics are getting so big that we're seeing that approach required even for the US and Canada and Mexico in 2026. Guys, the other thing that you had a look at was some of the emerging host regions, host cities, host nations across the world. What are some of the things that caught your eye there?
Am I allowed to say their names, or is that giving things away? I think I'll try and do this without giving their names away. I think what we were looking out for with this, I mean, I suppose people could probably take some good educated guesses as to who's in there. But yeah, I think it was obviously you're kind of looking at cities that have been throwing their names into the hat a little bit more and more often recently for those major events, whether it's an Olympics, whether it's a world championship. But at the same time, it was kind of it wasn't necessarily countries at large. You'd also be looking at sort of smaller cities that have carved out a niche for themselves, and in recent years have started to implement hosting strategies, have started to welcome some events already on some international events anyway on that kind of scale. So I think that's kind of what we were taking into account, as well as regions that are developing quite quickly in terms of their infrastructure, in terms of facilities as well. So yeah, I think this list is quite diverse. Quite a few continents represented on there. Yeah, so yeah, it's kind of a combination of all those things really. And as people will see when it gets published on the website on Friday, I think this one's going up, that it's there's quite a few destinations on there with kind of different kinds of ambitions.
And again, I suppose the thing to track will be where we see destinations emerge that attract major events, or what we now consider to be the major global events, and where we see new events and new properties developing that attract local or regional or global interest to those destinations.
Yeah, for sure. And I think obviously also, I think one thing that I did miss off is obviously governments throwing their weights behind major events as a strategy. We all know how important that can be for a country and in actually attracting major events. I suppose that's sort of the biggest part of the battle. So yeah, that also sort of informed who was on the list too.
Okay, well, as you mentioned, Sam, the full destinations report is being released across the week on sportspromedia.com. It's also available in issue 113 of SportsPro magazine, which you can find on the website if you have not already received it through your letterbox. That, I think, will do it for this part of the SportsPro podcast. We're now going to be dipping back into a session from SportsPro Live and talking about what happens inside venues within those host destinations, evangelizing the future of sports venues with Henk van Raan, the Chief Innovation Officer at the Johan Cruijff Arena in Amsterdam. And asking the questions is going to be Chris Stone, the Event Content Manager at SportsPro, looking at how stadiums and venues can evolve beyond simply hosting sporting events to become bigger cultural hubs, what fans can expect when attending matches in the future, and what technology is going to be delivering new experiences for them. That's coming up just after this.
Hello, I'm Matt Rogan. I've spent my career creating and scaling businesses in sports and entertainment, and now I'm talking to smart leaders inside and outside sport to get their ideas on managing change and building towards a better future. You can listen in on the Playbook podcast, a collection of candid, agenda-free conversations full of practical advice your company can work with. Get your new episodes right here on the SportsPro feed, and check out the rest of the series wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon. wherever you're joining us from. Very excited to be bringing you a bonus session for this year's SportsPro Live. It's one of the sessions I was most looking forward to. When we were putting together the content for SportsPro Live, it was all around this idea of transformation, data, technology, and bringing sports forward. So this session, on evangelizing the future of sports venues with the Chief Innovation Officer at the Johan Cruijff Arena, Henk van Raan, is going to take us through a conversation of what they're doing and how they're taking their stadium and pushing the limits to what it's capable of doing in terms of not only turning revenue, but also increasing the fan engagement while they're there. And one of the things we're really excited about, we're not just looking at what happens later this year when we start to see fans return, but also looking forward a couple years into the future to really see where venues can be in terms of their role within your ecosystem in the sports industry. So for there, I'm really happy to hand things over to Henk, who's going to take you through his presentation, and then we'll follow up with some questions afterwards.
Thank you, Chris, for this great introduction. Hello, everybody. I'm very excited to have the opportunity to explain you, let's say, the life cycle of the arena, and also share you our vision regarding the future. So first of all, let me explain you a little bit more about the background of the arena, where it's coming from, which mission we established from the beginning, and how we step by step transform ourselves into a nucleus for city transformation. So it's more than a stadium. It's a value fabric for the people of the place, the fans, the partners, and also the main users of our building. So coming to the future, let's start at the beginning. In 1996, Arena was established as a public-private entity, the first multifunctional stadium in Europe, state-of-the-art, with a retractable roof, and Ajax was main user of our building. At that time, it was really the first, let's say, stadium in Europe where we not only have top soccer events, but also huge events. So in the beginning, it was very hard. We had a lot of lessons learned, but our mission was to create a self-sufficient financially stadium. So in the beginning, we had some losses, but after the second year and the third year, we earned some profit, and that gives us the possibility that we are self-sufficient and are able to reinvest constantly and keep the state-of-the-art concept alive. So in 2000, a lot of clubs, cities came by, and they asked us how you did it and how you make sure that new stadiums could be, let's say, not become a white elephant, but creating value economically for the city, and how do you did it, and how do you make money came out of that. So we shared a lesson learned, and we established a new entity, Arena International, and we sell services, consultancy service all over the world and all over the globe, and share our lessons learned, and we generate extra profit that came out of that. In 2010, from that success as an economic impact we generated for the city asked us to take the lead in their sustainability program. In that time, sustainability was not sexy, so they asked us, "Can you not help us to be the showcase and show the world that sustainability could be sexy and also could be transformed in new value cases?" So we decided to embrace that ambition together with the city, and we transform all our utilities for more renewable utilities, and that gives us the possibility to make our stadium energy-wise carbon-free. So that was a really major step, and it was very successful. So after that, we put also solars on the roof. We generated more energy than we needed. And one of the biggest challenge we saw is that how can we, if we produce more energy than we needed, how can we give the extra energy we produce? How can we share that with our neighbors? So, and there is the new initiative. What we took was to create a battery where we can store our energy, what is left, and give it use it by ourselves or give it to our neighbors at the moment we don't need it. And that was a really great showcase and a really big impact, not only for ourselves, but it was a new standards for let's say sustainable buildings and sustainable stadia. So it was a great success, but we had also some lessons learned. And one of the eye openers starting the program was that if we have calculated our impact as a stadium, the impact coming from the mobility, the choices the customers are making the moment they are traveling to the arena, was 5 times bigger. So the real impact was not created by the arena, or of course when we host an event and the people are coming, but it's depending about the choices the fans are making at the moment they decided to come to the arena. So if we really want to make impact, we have to provide these citizens and these fans better alternative services like public transport or electric cars or organized transport. So that was a very big challenge. But the first step what we did is to create a mobility center to steer not only the crowd outside but also the traffic, and try to avoid traffic jam. And there we save a lot of pollution and CO2 outcome already. So the next step will be new way of transport, to define new way of transport to bring the fans to the stadium. But I come that later in a minute. I will explain you our ideas on that. In 2015, the city, they had a lot of challenges there. We are located in an urban development program and from the city. So they asked us if we want to make the city more efficient in terms of using, then the digitalization, the smart city concept must be part of our strategy and urban planning. So they asked us, can you take the lead for us and show the world how you can create a smart stadium concept? So there we're looking for new partners with new capabilities like Microsoft, like KPMG, to help us defining and program a digitalization program, how we make our building more digital and more steered by data instead of protocols. So it was a big revolution in our processes. You can imagine that. But the goal was, can we create more value for the visitors, to provide them better service and better fan experience, and also can we reduce cost and increase profit. So that was the goal behind this digitalization of our building, and it works quite well. So we have now established a living lab and a whole new ecosystem, and we challenged the world to come up with the brightest solution, with the brightest ideas, to bring that to our living lab and put it in a program and see if the solution in work in practice during the events. And if it is working, then we help our partners to scale up and implement it in our stadium or somewhere else. So this living lab approach, this digitalization transition was a massive step forwards. And we generate a lot of impact for our business and the value for our partners. So 2020, the city say, okay, well, and having an arena as a nucleus is working quite well. So one of our biggest challenges is, how we can engage the citizens of Amsterdam, and how we make sure that the value you are creating or we are creating with each other, that they have also some benefits on that. Because you can imagine, if this is an entertainment industry area, so we put a lot of pressure in terms of crowd management and safety, security, and so on this area, and also some CO2 and pollution. And how can we make sure that we try to avoid that, but also how can we create more value for the people of the place, so that they have also some benefits on what we are doing. And in the beginning, we are creating a lot of jobs already for this neighborhood, but the impact we can do in general is much bigger than only creating jobs. And I have an example for you later. And the city asked us to scale up to increase our living lab approach and bring it to the southeast district of Amsterdam. So now our living lab is not only taking care and bring the browser solution for the fans and our stadium, but also now steering huge transformation processes in urban development, like energy transition, like the shared economy, local for local, and the circular economy. These type of transformation is taking place with good examples in our living lab. And as you see on the drawing, we call that the donut economy. So we want to increase the profit, and we want to save the planet, and we want to create value for the people, with taking care about the planet, and also a social fundament, so that every people and every citizen are able to join us and to get some profit of our initiatives. In this slide, I want to show you how we organize all these ideas and let's say the teams and the program lines we have in place. It's all about smart cities. It's smart and safe and security. It's sustainability. It's inclusivity. So here you see the structure of the program, and how we organize all these ideas coming from the people, coming from our partners, coming from the city, or coming from the employees of Arena, or coming from our business. So this helps us to prioritize our, the projects and the pilots on a right way. So on the left bottom, you see our ecosystem, because innovation, you can do that by yourself. You need a whole supply chain to make really big innovations come true. So we have a huge ecosystem coming from the main users of our building: Dutch Football, FA, Ajax, Mojo Concert, and so on. And we have development partners, big brands globally, coming from the whole world, and they recognize us and they find us and bring their roadmap and the ideas, bringing to Amsterdam, and work together with this ecosystem on great solutions. On the right, I have show you a value chart coming from the Dutch FA, and I want to explain you a little bit more to give to give you an idea how we created value for one of our biggest clients and their fans, working on these different projects and the different values. I will walk through the chart. The yellow one is the well-being of the fans of the football federation. The orange is the impact on education. So that shows us what they do, which impact they make with sport on education and sport in general. The green one is the sustainability. How much clubs are engaged in the sustainability goals of the Dutch Football FA. The blue is the economics, the profit, how much jobs they generated and how much money they generated, and the total impact of sports from the Football FA in the Netherlands. And the red one is the location. It says how many people how many fans they bring every week to the stadium and have a great time. And it's in total 200,000 more or less average. So if you look at this pie, if you look at this value, it's very interesting what the location as arena can do to increase these values. And to give you an example, if you bring 200,000 people into the stadium and they make our choices in terms of transport, they generate a lot of CO2 and a lot of pollution. And how does it fit with the sustainability goals of the Dutch Football FA? They are in competition there. There is no let's say increase impact for sustainability if the people are coming to the stadium every week, 200,000 people. So this is an example how we work with the Dutch Football FA. How can we design a customer journey with them to avoid more pollution, to avoid increasing of on CO2. So that is the case, and that is why we try to help them and help the client from the client to make better choices and to make new services. So at the moment we are designing a whole new customer journey, a more sustainable journey, a seamless journey from for the fans of the Dutch Football FA. And the same thing, you could imagine if you're talking about the well-being, what can we do for the people of the place if we, in terms of safety, security, and crowd management, to avoid congestions and to avoid unsafe situation and creating business for the people of the place. So that's also an example where we're working on to create more values for the people, but also for the profit and the business in terms of sport. So these are two examples how we create more value, in this case for the Football FA. And whole other use case is Coldplay. Coldplay announced 2 years ago they are not touring anymore because they say the impact we generate on the planet is too big. So the moment what we want to do, our ambition is to design green events. So there is also where we step in. If you look at the blue left on the bottom, you see the impact of the venue. This is the pie they produce, not us. They are producing this pie. So on the left bottom you see the venue. You see the venue is 25% responsible for the negative impact. And the gray one, the right bottom, it's the transport, it's the customer journey. So again, if we come up with solution to optimize the customer journey, and we make our building more green. You see that we can already responsible for 50% reducing the impact on the sustainability issues. And to make it more measurable, we use the SDGs, the sustainability goals, as a standard to benchmark our impact with other stadia, also with corporates. Because what you see now that most of the corporates are embracing the SDGs more and more. So if we help Coldplay on, let's say, the planet, on this SDG, and we say Microsoft is helping, Honeywell is helping, because they have to also embrace the same SDGs, then you see a multiplier. Then you see a multiplier impact for the whole supply chain. And that's exactly what we are doing. We connect all these challenges and all these capabilities, all these partners, and we connect it on the same SDG, what they have embracing. So this is another use case, and you see that if you solve the planet, the P from planet, and you're creating value for the fans and the people, the profit will come automatically. So that's basically our approach. We believe that if we help our customers creating added value by saving the planet and creating value for their customers, Coldplay, on the end of the day, will choose the arena as the location where they do the shows. So again, we have 25 years experience of creating value now over the years, and this structure, this figure shows us how we plot all these initiatives on the P from people, the social fundament, and the P from the planet, the outside ring. And we plot them and give more structure on the impact we have generated so far. And it's a process what will not stop anymore. And I want to give you one example to make it more tangible, and that is the digital skills for the fans and the people of the place in our neighborhood, and that is education. We have done 2 semesters last year together with Microsoft, and and one semester 30 students was to transform women on Azure, the woman who wants to make a career switch, going to a data scientist, become a data scientist, and we transformed 30 ladies together with Microsoft. And the other semester was 30 refugees to become an Azure administrator. And at the end of the day, all these 60 persons find a job in the IT. So if you calculated the outcome, the impact in creating jobs and connecting people to find a job, the impact, the societal impact, but also the financial impact is enormous. So, and for us, it was an easy job, but it's a way of looking at your role. It's a way of looking at the impact you can make for your partners. What we have defined now to engage, let's say, initiatives and new business partners, we define a new proposition. One is how we can create societal impact and plot that on the SDGs of these companies, and make the connection with the ecosystem and search for the same SDGs from the vision that how we can make a multiplier and how we can find the companies with the right capabilities and the same ambition on the same sustainability goals. So the societal impact, of course, also the business impact, the profit is very important, of course, and the public and the culture value. So what is changing in the old way of thinking is that we also now looking at the societal impact. And if you look at the big brands, you see that more and more the purpose of the companies are changing, and they are more related to saving the planet and creating jobs of the future. So the interest of these companies are also moving in that direction. And there is exactly where we looking at for these kind of partners to join us and to work with us and make step in the future, creating a better world, creating and shaping the new economy and the new value for every stakeholder. So my conclusion is that we are doing this now for 25 years. Arena and the stadium in general could and should be taking a bigger role, not only hosting events but also in urban development, in huge transformations processes. That's my opinion, because a stadium is a place where people meet, is a place where everyone comes together, and intrinsic it could be a nucleus for new business, new innovation, and creating value for everyone.
Print, digital, events, podcasts, SportsPro.
Well, thank you for that, Henk. I enjoyed that, and I've got a couple questions myself, and then there's a couple questions from the audience that we'll bring in. And I think the first one we'll start on, the effort around sustainability. One of the things we've heard when we speak to people is there's this idea that sustainability is an expense, that in order to be a sustainable venue, it requires extra costs that aren't necessarily profitable. And you've obviously touched on in your presentation that that's not been the case for you. So if you could just elaborate a little bit more, if I'm someone at another football club that sits in your role, how am I talking to my CFO or someone that's in charge of budgets to sort of have this conversation around why this as a business impact is something we should pursue?
Yeah, it's a good question. Our experience is that if you define a case, a business case, you don't look at only the revenues, the return on investment. You also have to look in the total impact in terms of CO2 reduction and in terms of let's say innovation and lessons learned. Because at the end of the day, and now customers are not choose directly for Arena, but I show you two cases, one of Coldplay and one of the Dutch Football FA. They will choose for a location what is more sustainable. They preferred to play in that type of events location. So it's a matter of time, and maybe not now, but it's a matter of time. There will be new regulations, environmental regulations, that if a venue is not sustainable enough, you don't get a license to host any event. So it's a matter of time, So, and we said internal that was our policies. Every initiative, what in terms of sustainability, what have a return of investment of 10 years, it's a no-brainer. We will do it. So that is very important. 10 years was a critical line. And also what we did is every time we replace systems, because, of the life cycle, we choose for a more renewable system. So, and that helps also a lot. So two strategies. If you do some replacement in your building, choose more renewables systems, and second, and return on investment 10 years, it's a no-brainer for us. And at the end of the day, the customer will choose your building, your venue, because they will identify themselves. They want to play in a more sustainable building than a building who are not sustainable.
And I appreciate that answer, and I think it leads quite nicely into a question from our audience, and I'll add an extra layer to it to kind of blend this all together. And, we had a question from Sasha, and it was, do you believe the bulldozing of the old Wembley Stadium was inevitable or smart in the long run? And I think I want to tie this into the comment you made, which is, does this require someone to build a new stadium, a new infrastructure, if they didn't already have this idea of sustainability in mind when they designed it? Or is there a way to incorporate, an older venue to start upgrading this? I know you mentioned your last answer talking about, you're always having to upgrade your facility. It's just making those conscious decisions to upgrade as you go to more sustainable things. But, for some, is it better? Is it more feasible to kind of start from scratch, or is it, replacing what you've already got?
Yeah, ideally you make your building smart and sustainable by design. That's the most efficient way. But, the world is changing rapidly. So we don't know how the world look like in 3 or 4 years. So flexibility and resiliency is one of the key competence of a stadium, in my opinion. So the board, the policies, the strategy, that must be incorporated, that you are, more resilient, more flexible than maybe in the past. Because that enables you to keep your building state of the art or modern or attractive for your customers.
Yeah, excellent. So when we're talking about sort of upgrading, and I think I'm obviously biased being American, and there's this whole growth of these, the SoFi Stadium in LA. You've got the Cowboys Stadium. There's all these big super stadiums. So we're looking, European stadiums in general tend to be a bit older. As we're looking at upgrading towards this smart city, is there a particular area you would tell someone? Because our audience is, we've got people from Real Madrid, we've got people from, Arsenal, these big clubs, but we also have a lot of audience members that come from lower tier football clubs. In your opinion, is there a particular area you would start in terms of, this development towards a smart stadium? Should you focus on sustainability efforts first? Should you focus on the fan engagement side of, improving your venue? Is there a particular area you say you would prioritize, if you're working with limited budgets in terms of upgrading your venue?
Yeah, it's depending about this case by case. But ideally, I would start by the sustainability approach. I think it's a top priority more and more, not only in Europe but also in countries. You see, it's high placed on the agenda in every country. So. And I think in the partnership you have as a stadium or as a club, you don't do it by yourself. You have to challenge your partners. Imagine if you have Coca-Cola or you have Microsoft and they are sponsor of your building, and this building is not sustainable. They walk away on the end of the day. So why do you not challenge them and say, okay, can we not make a coalition of the willing and say in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, our building is climate neutral. Engage them, challenge them in terms of creating visibility and exposure and also knowledge and to combine all these capabilities and bring them on one table. In my opinion, my experience is if you don't start with this, you lose the game anyhow. So give it a try, bring these people on the table and have an open conversation and say, we have our stadium. We have an ambition to be a climate neutral stadium. and we have the brightest and the best capabilities in-house. Why should we not combine them and help us together and make our building sustainable?
Brilliant. And I've got another specific question. How familiar you are with West Ham? Mark wants to ask a question. West Ham have moved recently from their beloved ground at Upton Park and moved over to the Olympic Stadium. In terms of stadium experience, what can you as a venue owner do to increase fan engagement? Or particularly, we look at West Ham or, Everton's about to move into a new stadium. How can you maintain, the essence of the footballing spirit and keep that fan engagement high?
Well, I don't know. I'm not familiar with the case, but what I can only tell what we did. What we did is because we don't know what we don't know, and there are so much bright solution in the world, and if you look at the startups, the scale-ups, there is so much possible. So what we did, we organized a European call, subsidized door Brussels, a European call, and challenged the world to help us with the fan experience and come up with the brightest ideas, what they can think of. It was organized and facilitated by KPMG, and the subsidy came from Europe, from Brussels. So, and we call it Reimagine Football. And you don't believe what kind of solutions they sent us. It's enormous. More than 1,500 different solutions they sent us, and so it was a big challenge to validate all these solutions. And at the end of the day, we award 15 of them, and one of the award was it was subsidized by Brussels. We help them to bring that idea alive in a pilot phase, test it, and if the test was okay, we help them to scale up. So now we have, I believe, from the 15 startups, we have now, I think, 5 new partners, solution partners, who are step in our ecosystem. We do business with them, and Ajax is fully adapted the solutions. The Dutch Football Alliance fully adapted solutions. So again, my opinion is, there is so much possible nowadays, and there are so much smart guys in the world, startups, scale-ups. Challenge them and say, well, this is our venue, this is our audience, this is our vision. We like to innovate. Come to us, help us, and create value for each other.
That's excellent. I'm glad to hear you bring up Reimagine Football. Your colleague Sander has been on one of our previous events and spoke about it. We had Hale Kirkles from the Dutch FA. We've had Jean Baptiste on speaking about Reimagine Football. So I guess the last question I would sort of bring up is along these lines, and you kind of touched on a little bit, what is the importance of collaboration, particularly when we're talking about the sustainability approach, and, what can, you offer, or I say, are you open, if anyone's listening to this saying, Henk, I've got no idea how to do this, what's the importance of collaboration? Are you open to, having these conversations and, get people along the right path?
Yeah, of course, we are always open to, to share ideas with colleagues. So, that's always okay. So we want to help the industry. It's also, one of our goals to help each other. So yes, we are always open to help each other. It's depending, how big the question is. So yes, we are always open to make the industry better and bigger and more profitable and more sustainable.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us this morning, Henk. That was a really great session. I think it's on an incredibly important topic, from the digital transformation side as well as the sustainability side. So I really appreciate getting your expertise on this. And like I said, if anybody hears that and you need help, you've got someone here to offer some guidance, and that's hopefully what we can provide. So thank you once again for joining us, Henk, and I look forward to catching up soon.
Okay, success. Bye-bye.
Join the conversation with the SportsPro community. Follow us on Twitter @SportsPro and @SportsPro Events. Find us on Instagram @sportspro.media. And connect to SportsPro Media on LinkedIn, where you can also become a part of our specialist OTT community. SportsPro, connecting and inspiring the business world of sport.
All right, I think we are coming to the end of this SportsPro podcast. Thank you to Henk van Raan and Chris Stone for their time just there. Speaking of SportsPro events, guys, we have a couple on the slate. One coming up next week, the return, Ed, of the SportsPro Insider Series. What can you tell us about that?
Yep, so it's taking place on the 19th of May. This one's going to be focusing on esports. Obviously, it's enjoyed quite a rise, a lot of eyes on it over the last year and a bit, obviously, with the initial lockdown and, a lot of traditional sports organizations turning to gaming and esports to help entertain their fans. So this one's going to be looking at how they've carried that momentum and also how some of esports' approaches can be adopted to traditional sports. So it's quite an eclectic sort of take on competitive gaming. But there's some great names on there. We've got Drone Racing League, Team Liquid, NBA 2K League. So it's a pretty substantial lineup. So do check it out if you can.
Yeah, SportsProInsiderSeries.com is the place to go to register for that. And of course, you can explore our vast back catalogue of SportsPro Insider Series events. They're all available for free on demand. It's a fantastic resource there. Whatever your interests are in the sports industry. Sam, we have another major event coming up with a specific regional focus. What can you tell us about SportsPro APAC?
Well, and what I can tell you about SportsPro APAC is that it's happening on the 7th and 8th of July. But in the build-up to that event, which is going to feature the head of sports from Star and Disney India, the marketing director at KO Sports, and the president of the International Paralympic Committee, among others, we've got a series of events in the build-up to it. The first one, I believe, happened this week on Wednesday, which had a specific focus on India. But fear not, Eoin. The next one is on the 26th of May, and this one's going to be focusing on China. Already for that one, we've got speakers confirmed from Borussia Dortmund, World Table Tennis, the UFC. 26th of May for that next one in the build-up to SportsPro APAC on the 7th and 8th of July.
Fantastic. Exciting and intriguing times ahead in the Asia-Pacific region when it comes to sport, and a lot of those themes being explored at SportsPro APAC. SportsProAPAC.com, unsurprisingly, is the place to go for information and to register for a pass. Okay, guys, job done on that front. Thank you very much for your time. Thanks again, as I said, to Henk van Raan and to Chris Stone. Thank you to Ed Dixon.
Cheers, Eoin. I'll get back behind the decks, as you put it at the start.
Not that there's any editing to do on this show ever. And thank you as well to Sam Carp.
Cheers, Eoin. Cheers, Ed. Nice to see you both.
Thanks to all of you for listening. We'll be back with you again very soon. Bye-bye.
The SportsPro podcast is published by SportsPro Media. The producer is Ed Dixon.